Virgin Beauty Bitch Podcast. Inspiring women to overcome social stereotypes and share unique life experiences without fear of being defiantly different. Your hosts, Christopher and Heather. Let's talk, shall we?
What do you think of when you hear the words self-care? Do you have visions of an exclusive spa, maybe in the tropics, or a full day being pampered at a salon? Or maybe it's just a bubble bath and a juicy book. What about the kind of self-care, though, that gets under your skin? Self-care that can assist you in getting the most out of yourself and the most out of your life. For that kind of self-care, it helps to know someone like our guest. She's an international speaker who has shared stages with names like Michael Beckwith, Marci Shimoff, and Lynne Twist. She's also a #1 international best-selling author, a Master Facilitator, a Certified Embodiment Coach, and wait for it, she's also the founder of Courageous Self-Care. Welcome back, Christina Marlett, to Virgin Beauty Bitch.
Thank you very much. I'm so happy to be here.
We are overjoyed to have you, Christina. You have a new book titled Not Your Mama's Self-Care Guide, because she probably had none, so you should read this.
Yes.
We'll get tips from that as we go along here. But first, Christina, what would you say it is that people misunderstand most about the concept of self-care, and why is it so important?
Well, self-care, like you were saying, it's actually a pretty new concept. So we're in the baby stages of it still in terms of pop culture. And it was created initially as a political statement. And I did this research when I was writing this book because I had already had a shift in my ideas around what self-care was. And I was very surprised to learn that it really only emerged kind of in the 60s, 1960s. So then it turned into a marketing frenzy, I think, like what you were saying, putting stuff on your skin and being pampered and very external. And even then it kind of shifted into like what you can do to take care of yourself in terms of nutrition and hydration and rest and what's the other thing? Movement. And yes, that's all important. But as I often say, you can take all the bubble baths that you want, but if you're at your core kind of unhappy, the bubbles are not going to help all that much. Sadly, they do not go down the drain. Your unhappiness will not go down the drain with no effort on your part. And so I'm very interested in internal self-care, which is shifting we have a choice about every belief that we have. For instance, there's a section in there on how do you interact with time? It's a choice. You can choose to believe that life is short, or you can choose to believe that life is not only long, it's also wide. And one of them, to me, feels way better than the other one. And so, yeah, we get to choose our beliefs. We also get to be noticing where our thoughts tend to go, our standard emotional set point. And so when we start to pay attention to what's happening on the inside, that takes courage. That's why it's courageous self-care. It's much easier to just go and eat chocolate and have bubble baths. But if we start to pay attention to the inside, then in the book, I drew lots of fantastic but not very good images, diagrams. Like if I was sitting down next to you and I wanted to explain something, that's what it's like. So lots of stick figures. And I have a diagram of if you have a kayak and you're paddling and you're just sticking in your oar on the external self-care, you're going to go in circles. But when you start to dip in the internal self-care and then the external self-care and then the internal and the external, then you'll start to make progress in life.
I wanted to just add on to that. What is the difference between personal development as another industry that has developed recently and self-care? Are they combined or are they separate? How do those things work together?
Ooh, good question. So I would say they can definitely piggyback upon each other. And personal development, at least in my experience, and I've done a lot of it, it can be very get out there and do stuff, like with arms waving in the air and flags and capes and that kind of thing. And self-care, it can be very personal. So, like, I used to have a podcast and I interviewed people all the time and asked them what self-care meant to them. And I got so many different answers. One woman's version of self-care was singing to her chickens every morning. Like, whoa, that never crossed my mind that that could be self-care. That's fantastic. I love it. So I think they can be synonymous. And then also, what I've come to understand in my training as an embodiment coach is that so much of personal development is just focused on the mind. And while the mind is magnificent, it can also be quite tricky. We have so much valuable wisdom below the neck. And so I think that self-care has the opportunity to be really holistic and not just accessing the wisdom of the body, but the wisdom of our entire energy system.
I think you've just really like hit the nail on the head when I think of those two as different entities that may overlap or even be synonymous at times. That I feel a lot of our culture has almost jokingly gone into being a human doing rather than a human being. And, you know, just how much of self care is still an act, like when you're talking about the external surface level, an act of doing something to try to get almost a transaction back. Whereas what your book is about, diving into more, you know, the human being, being attuned to the whole being, rather than just what's above the neck. So could you help our guests, our audience, kind of go into how you bring it from, you know, maybe not just below the neck, but to get out of this human doing all in the mind sort of frenzy that we're in?
Absolutely. There's so many parts of the book we could go to. But I think maybe the top level of it is there's a section on the being and the doing. And from my perspective, I don't know that I learned this from anyone. It was, or maybe I did, and I just forgot that I learned it from them. But my understanding of being and doing is actually it came from this kid's book called something like Let's Do Nothing. And it's two kids trying to do nothing, but they discover even when they're lying there doing nothing, they're still lying there trying to do nothing. And so my awareness around that is, I think the missing piece there for me at least was that we're always going to be doing something. Like even if you're chilling, you're doing something. If you are meditating, you're doing something. So to me, what's important is how you're being while you're doing. Like for instance, I was talking to a client one time and she was trying to do something good for herself, going for a miles long walks every day. And then she told me what her mind was doing while she was um, walking, and she was berating herself like, why am I not going further? Do I even really want to be walking? Maybe I should be at the gym. Like it was echoing the patterns in the subconscious of I'm not enough, am I ever going to be enough? And that is how she was being while she was walking, versus when I go for a walk I'm like, the trees, they're beautiful. I'm so connected with the fall colors. Oh, the grasses are blowing in the wind. I'm going to give them a high five just for being alive. So,
Oh,
like, same activity, but very different experience. And to me, one certainly feels better than the other. So it's developing this awareness of no matter what you're doing, how are you being? What's going on in the mind? What are you noticing as sensation in the body? Like if I'm out for a walk and I'm reveling in the gorgeousness, I'm also tuning into like, how does that actually feel as sensation? And oh, it feels magnificent. It feels expansive and effervescent and like just totally in alignment with the wonderful benefits of being in nature.
Did our grandmothers and mothers, were their lives somehow simpler or so different that they didn't necessarily need what it is that we need today in order, self-care is concerned?
I think, yes, simpler and also not necessarily better. So, from my perspective, even just a few generations ago, it was about survival. There wasn't the luxury of self care. So, we are in a magnificent place right now. because we have washing machines to wash our clothes while we can go do something else. We have dishwashers that will wash our dishes. And we have, so yeah, it might be simple to go to the river and wash your clothes, but then it takes like 6 hours. So not even the awareness of anything called self-care. And so, yes, simpler, but also, and then like our lives are complicated now, but we do have more leisure time. So I think, and then technology, like, I don't know about you, but like technology, I need self-care after dealing with technology. So we, the Dalai Lama has said that it's the Western woman that is going to save the world. And I don't know about saving the world, but Western women, we have advantages that women in other parts of the world don't have. We get to vote. We get to speak freely for the most part. We get to work in ways that we want to that bring us joy. And so we also have the responsibility, because we have all of this, at least I feel a great responsibility to help shift consciousness. I feel a responsibility to help uplift humanity. And when I pay attention to myself, and this is why I say in the book, and I believe self-care is not selfish, because when I'm working on myself, especially in this internal way, to access more and more vibrations of how I want to feel more and more often, I become, and if you're doing this too, you become a blessing no matter what you're doing. I could be washing my hair and I could be radiating great energy to someone on the other side of the world who needs it in that moment, just because maybe I'm singing, or maybe I've just had an aha, or maybe I'm just feeling so grateful for the hot water. And so you don't even have to go out and do these gigantic things. When you pay attention to what's going on in your inner world, you get to just be a blessing and have an impact, no matter what you're doing.
There's a couple things that you've said that I find so uplifting, like giving the long grass a high five and
So
singing in the
fun.
shower. It's so fun. It's so lovely. And being grateful for hot water while you sing in the shower. And I think, with all of the hardship that does come in life, no matter where you are on this planet, the loss that happens with all of us, finding those moments that can be a glimmer of something vibrant. I think that there's something to what you just said, and I think that when you get out of that shower and you're out in the world again, and what you give off in the interactions that you're experiencing, that can make such changes in how another person's day is, or what kind of new opportunities come to mind because you're not stuck you know, in the challenge, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Are there other elements of your book when it comes to this? Because I love how you said, where is your being while you're doing? And in a world that is so fascinated with what you can achieve in order to be successful, rather than what are you actually getting in this experience, in this body, as you move through the things that you do in this world. Can you share with us, like, when people are trying to take a deeper dive of that internal monologue or that internal voice, what have you found helpful to kind of bring awareness to it, and maybe even like set a new path?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a chapter called The Jungle of the Mind or something like that, because it can be a jungle in there. And initially, my mind was so critical, and everything was about getting it right. And if I got it right, is there a way to get it righter? And comparison oriented and just super perfectionistic. And so I've learned some different ways of showing up in there. Don't need the machete anymore to navigate the jungle of the mind. And so I would say two things. I was just teaching this to a group recently. So there are very basic practices if you're kind of at a starter point with this. A very great practice is to be observant of what's going on in the mind, because the thoughts we have, they're different estimates, but like 60,000 thoughts a day. And at least 80% of those thoughts, if you haven't worked with your mind, 80% of them are negative. And like 98% of them are the same thoughts that you had the day before and the day before, like for decades and decades. And so what we want to do is become aware of what we're thinking. And so you might notice, oh, I'm so grumpy. Okay, what was I thinking? Oh, I was thinking this. And then whatever statements or thought patterns that you notice, if they have kind of a negative tone to them, like self-defeatist or being really hard on yourself, then you switch them to the positive. So let's say you notice that you were thinking, I'm a loser. No wonder that didn't go well. I'm such a loser. And so when you notice that and you have awareness, all of a sudden you're not necessarily believing that that's true. There's a part of you, the observer, that has been turned on and saying, oh, I noticed that I was thinking that, and I'm more powerful than that thought. And so like the basic practice is, if you're thinking you're a loser, turn it into the positive and repeat it to yourself 3 times. So the exact opposite might be, I'm a winner. I'm a winner. I'm a winner. And it might not feel true at all, but it's better than believing what your mind initially said to you. So that's one practice that is super effective. And that's where I certainly started out. And then a practice that I'm loving right now is so turning on that observer again and going another step beyond and saying, okay, part of my mind that made that up, I love you. Thank you for being a part of me. Like, the more love we can pour into our hilarious little mind, it's just doing its best. It makes up problems and then shows you that it's being useful by trying to solve them and fix them. But if that worked, it would have worked by now. And so the mind, it wants to be of service. It wants to do a great job. And the only way that really it's been trained, at least in my experience and kind of Western thought, is to make up problems so that it can solve them. But the next step above that is to just pour love in. Like, oh, little mind that thinks I'm a loser. That is so cute. Like, when are you going to learn? But I love you anyways. I'm just pouring in unconditional love because you're a part of me. I accept that you're here. I am so big that I can embrace all the parts of myself. And so I'm just loving you. And when that part of your mind that has all it wanted was attention, it just wanted some recognition. And some people teach that we're at war with the ego and that we need to, conquer it. I have learned that from a number of different teachers and mentors, it's actually love. If we can pour love in, love is the highest vibration. Nothing is bigger than love. So when we pour love in, then that part of the mind just goes, I've been trying to get her attention for so long, and now I did. I can be on my way now. Thank you. I feel so much better. And then it knows it's been of service to you. So some different ideas there on how you can deal with that jungle in there.
It's interesting because Heather and I, when we started this podcast, it was based on a premise of feminine, masculine. And it sounds, this resonates with that so perfectly. It's like the masculine wanting to make stuff up so it can fix it, because that's what it does.
Yeah.
Right? And then the feminine comes along and says, there, I love you. It's okay.
Yes, totally.
Right? I love you and I see you.
Yes.
Well said, Christopher, because I'm thinking of, even like, what came to mind for me was kind of little kids that will make up all kinds of different problems, but really at the heart of it is they just want someone to look at them and notice what they're doing, just to feel seen. So I love that you've applied that to these different elements of what our mind can say, because I definitely resonate with trying to battle it. Almost kind of feeds it in the wrong direction.
Yeah.
So it sounds a lot more soothing to say, oh, okay, you are there. I see you over there. And I love you.
Exactly. And we can do that with all the feeling parts of us too. Like, oh, the part of me that feels ashamed, I don't need to make you go away. I'm just going to love you. Thank you for being a part of me. The part of me that feels betrayed, I love you. The part of me that feels offended, the part of me that feels enraged and furious, I love all of you. Let's just all gather around and spend some time together. And it sounds so simplistic that probably some minds out there are going like, yeah, I don't think so. That won't work. But it
Their part of
really
the mind's
is.
like, no, no.
Yeah. It's got to be more complicated than that. Like, I need to take a course with 78 steps on how to conquer this problem that I have. And actually, no, like pouring love in. And sometimes I'll share that with people and they'll be like, but how do you do that? I'm like just what I said. You literally find that part of you, you identify what you were just feeling, maybe put your hands on your heart if that feels good to you. And you just say, okay, part of me that's feeling sad, I love you. And then you just hang out with that part of you for a little while and it will melt. Like generally within 5 minutes, if I was enraged and furious and writhing with outrage, within 5 minutes, I'm like, what was the issue? I don't know. I feel so much better.
Simplicity. Yeah, we make it more complicated than it needs to be.
Mhm.
Courageous and courage. Talk about that and the courage it takes to do the simple things like you just spoke about.
Right. So I love the idea. I read it once and expounded upon it. So bravery is an external thing. Like we would attribute bravery to someone else because we don't know what's going on in their inner world. So someone might say to me, "You're so brave. You do public speaking." And brave is actually the absence of fear. So that's public speaking for me. I don't have a fear around it. I love it. I get excited. The more people, the better. So brave is something that we don't know what's going on in someone's inner world, but it's also an absence of fear. Courage means taking action in spite of fear. So loving that part of you that is afraid and proceeding anyway. And the reason that it's important to do that is because what you want is on the other side of the fear. And what I'm talking about, like not the mansion that you want or the new outfit or the new purse that you want. No, it's values on the other side that are so important to you that you're willing to get uncomfortable. That's all that fear is. It's just being uncomfortable. Also not buying into the stories that the mind has made up of what's going to happen when you do proceed. But it is being so in love with maybe the idea of like, I love creativity. I love learning. I just bask in being of service. And so all of those things are more important to me than staying where I am and not moving through that fear. Courage, of course, it means the cœur, the heart in French, and that's where it comes from. So we're using our heart to connect with what is on the other side of the fear, and then we're moving through. So self-care that takes courage, it is doing things that are not normal. Like I say to my kids are at the age where they have significant others, they have boyfriends and girlfriends, and I know that lots of the things I talk about are super weird, especially to teenagers. So I'll just preface it and say, yeah, that's just because I'm weird. It's okay. And like I do this and I'm weird. And oh, yeah, our family's a little bit weird. And just putting it out there and being okay with it helps to diffuse any thoughts that they might already be having. So it's doing things that might be unpopular. It's doing things that might be uncomfortable. It's doing things like I tend to function outside of the what is popular and normal. So that's why all of this self-care, especially like just the idea of going within, that's not, it's normal to me. And it's normal within the like the people I coach and the programs that I teach for. But when I get out into the regular world, I'm like, oh, right, I'm so weird. I'm so different. And but I'm much happier. So like I remember one time I was at this event and um I made a decision after 9/11 to not watch the news anymore. And a few years later, I stopped listening to the news. And I was at this event, and a woman asked me if I had heard about this thing that was happening. I said, oh, actually, I don't really partake in the news. And she just looked at me and she said, yeah, I can tell that about you. You look so happy. And I don't know if it was a compliment or not, but I took it as one. So it's not normal to not watch the news. And I have people in my life who are very concerned that I don't partake, but I always find out what's important. So I'm not worried about that.
I hear you.
Yeah, well, I think the lesson there is really owning who you are. Like, and you just are beaming when you say who you are and owning it. So I think that speaks volumes.
Well, thank you. I'm way different from how I used to be. I used to be quiet and reserved, and I thought I was happy. And then what I realized after diving deeply into this new world, I realized, oh, I was conditionally happy. I was happy if I won an award, or as happy if I got good grades when I was in high school and university, or as happy if I got compliments. And what I realize now is, well, that was good. It was better than being not happy. Uh, it's not the same kind of happy that I am now. I am like deeply content no matter what happens. I have such a solid, unbreakable foundation that there can be all sorts of stuff happening in the outer world, whether it's way far out in the world or even in my immediate relationships. And yeah, sometimes, of course, things are tumultuous and challenging, and I practice loving all the parts of me that are showing up, but I don't get phased like I used to.
Well, you're setting your own boundaries. I mean, getting awards and good grades, someone else has set those as standards for you to meet. And
Yes.
yes, you feel happy when you've accomplished that because you've made someone else's standards, your own. But to have your own boundaries, to have your own values, and to accomplish those, that takes a lot of work to assemble.
Yeah, right. Who am I, anyways?
Exactly, exactly. Which is what's fantastic about all of this work. So your book, who is it for, and what can they expect to get out of getting that book for themselves?
Well, the back of the book explains it quite well, I think. It's for women in particular. Of course, anyone can read it. It's not off limits, but it's for the high achieving, highly productive woman who on the outside appears very successful, and on the inside, there are cracks in the foundation. It might be like a tendency to really be in that performing personality, like, I look good on paper, but if you were to really get to know me, yikes. So it might be a woman who is like my mom's age, kind of that generation, who had no frame of reference for self-care, so it's a brand new thing. It's also for women my age, like I have teenagers who are at the higher end of the teens. It's definitely for people like me. Like, boy, if I would have had this book a few years ago, whew, would have been so good. And it's also for young women, anyone who is interested in, so like I've worked with a lot of women who have big accolades and like C-suite executives running companies, deans of universities, professors, principals of schools, that kind of thing. And while, like I said, while it looks good on paper, there might be issues going on that are not on the paper, like their body is definitely speaking to them in significant ways with pain, chronic issues, dis-ease. It might be relationships. Like it might look good from the outside, but there can be problems with the relationships. It's also for the woman who is very, could be in that really masculine energy, who is very goal oriented and yet feels surprisingly empty once the goals are accomplished, because a lot of structure has been built, a lot of that masculine energy. So it might be the accomplishments that are being built, but the essence, the divine feminine flowing through the inside is missing. And when we build without the essence, it crumbles. So what I'm a big fan of doing is pausing, reflecting, gathering before we move forward into the next thing, so that we're benefiting from the journey along the way. It's not just a list of accomplishments. It is like, who am I becoming? Let's celebrate. I have a whole section on how I think we mostly get celebration wrong, and the benefit of doing something I call deep celebration. So, like acknowledging who you are, because anything you're wanting to get from the outer world, if you can learn to give it to yourself, oh, you will feel so full. You won't need to depend on others to fill you up.
You
Fabulous.
just said this so eloquently, but I'm going to ask it because we enjoy asking this of our guests. But Christina, what does feminine mean to you?
Oh, I have a whole chapter on that too.
Love it.
So at one point, I didn't even know it was a thing. And I remember reading Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus. And I didn't understand the Venus part at all. I'm like, what? Women are like that? Huh? I'm so confused. I could only identify with the masculine. And so to me, they're both important. The thing about the masculine is that a while ago it got severed from its divinity and it turned into power over others. And so there's nothing inherently wrong with the divine masculine nor the divine feminine. And so I think they're both parts of the same whole. So I like the hunter energy to describe the divine masculine. It's laser focused. It is goal oriented. It is action oriented. It is the structure. It's the form. Like I know what I'm doing. This is my task. I'm going to do it. And that's where I used to live. But there probably was not any divinity to it. Then, when I discovered the divine feminine, that is the gatherer energy. So it's being aware of the seasons, it's being aware of what's going on in the community, it's knowing what we can use from the earth to nourish ourselves. It is the flow, it's the life force. And I think probably in the book, I'm pretty sure I put this in there. There's a follow-up book that's coming, so it's in one of the two, but I'm pretty sure it's in this one. Once I went to the ballet with this new frame of reference of the divine masculine and the divine feminine, and I watched a pas de deux with new eyes. So I saw the two dancers, the man and the woman. So first of all, the man did his solo, and it was heroic. He was jumping so high and spinning so fast, and we could really see his strength. And people applauded because it was just, wow, like that is divine masculine, and it was glorious. And then the woman came out, the prima ballerina, and she did her solo. And boy, was she strong, but in a completely different way. She could spin and spin and spin, but she added flexibility and fluidity, and she could hold her leg way up above her head for so long, and she could balance on her toes with other limbs going out in different directions and stay centered amidst the spinning. And so you get the idea that, whoa, that's a lot of strength too. So there's nothing true about the feminine being weak at all. And then when they came together, I really understood why we want this wholeness and completeness. Everything in nature is a perfect example of the union between the masculine and feminine. And so when the man was with the woman, he could help her stretch even further. He could lift her higher than she could go by herself. He could help her jump further. And so to me, that's what the union is. We want to have the cradle of the masculine, the form, so that the life force of the divine feminine, the creativity can flow, but without taking over. Like a riverbank, the river, the bank is the masculine, and the river flowing through it is the feminine. If we don't have the masculine, we have a flood. So we don't want that. And if we have no feminine, we have a drought. We don't want that. We want the union between the two. So that's a roundabout way of answering your question. But yeah, that's what the feminine is to me. It's strong, it's life force, it's mysterious, it is creativity, it is it can be very wild. And so I think the conversation also has to include that cradle, that form of the divine masculine to hold it. Otherwise, it's too much. And same thing, too much of the masculine, which is what we've experienced, that doesn't work either. So the union is what's super important to me.
Interesting your use of the ballet,
Beautiful.
because in growing up, I remember the Olympics and ice dance pair, Torval and Dean. And to me, that was the epitome of masculine and feminine. They would dance to bolero, and just the way they worked together, like you said, strength on both ends, but different. It was absolutely miraculous. So I understand what it is you're talking about. Go to YouTube, Torval and Dean, check it out. All right. Definitive.
Fantastic.
So thank you so much for sharing with us. Your titles always get me. They're just so great. Not your mama's self-care guide, because she probably had none. So you should use this.
Just telling it like it is. And I said to my mom, this isn't about you. This is about all moms. Don't take this personally.
That's perfect. That's perfect. Well, we can't thank you enough for giving us your time and your energy. It's always so vibrant, and we love having these conversations with you.
Thank you so much. It's such an honor and a pleasure to be here. And you ask such great questions. So, that's how we want to be using the mind. We want to be using the mind to answer great questions and go beyond where we've been before, and then also pour in that love. So thank you for facilitating that.
I mean, as always, Christina, it's so nice to hear from you again and to see this next book. So I can't wait to read it. Full stop. Tell our listeners where they can get a copy.
Well, currently it's on Amazon in all the countries, I believe. I'm pretty sure I set it up that way. So yes, Amazon, if you just search in Not Your Mama's Self-Care Guide or Christina Marlett, you will find it.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. It's just a joy and pleasure to have you. And you have been listening to
The Virgin,
the Beauty,
and the Self-Care Bitch. The bitch deserves self-care too, okay?
Love
For
it.
sure.
Find us, like us, share us, and then come on back. We have more laughs and more serious stuff for you. Thank you so much.